Om Sahana Vavatu Sahana Bhataktu Sahaviryam Kar Vavahai Tejasvi Navaditamastu Mavidvi Shavahai Om Shantihi Shantihi Shantihi. May Brahman protect us, may Brahman sustain us, may Brahman illumine our thinking consciousness. May we not find fault with each other, with the world, or with the teachings, and may what we study be a source of inspiration to us eternally. Om peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us, may peace be unto all. Om Hari Om. Welcome tonight to our evening satsang, as dark has fallen around and we are in Hawaii offering you this opportunity to enter into satsang. That is, Sat is truth and Sangha is a group that gathers together. Our group nowadays can be widespread because of the contemporary technology that puts us in one place and at one time. And that's also the tone and tenor of one of the questions that's been sent in about time. I was actually going to continue on with the teachings on karma that we left off with last Tuesday, but I see there are no questions here on karma, so we'll just go into this question on time. And one student then writes in, with regards to the Jnana-matra teachings, can you talk a little more on Smriti and Smriti Bedu? How are memories formed? Are our past life memories hidden in Smriti Bedu? It is confusing if we start to think about memories within the one eternal moment. If all of time is just an illusion, then what can we say about memory? So, as I was saying, much like being in one space together due to our modern technology, consciousness is rather like that one moment, as is said here in this question. Out of this one moment will arise all sorts of memories. It doesn't mean necessarily because one part of the ocean might be solidified into icebergs, and then another part might be warm, and another part could be cool, another part could be quiet, another part could be wavy, and one part could be still while the other part is restless and roiling on the surface. So just like an ocean, consciousness can break into waves, as Sri Ramakrishna, the great master, used to say, and it can also appear as still and calm, serene. So much like that, I'd say sometimes bubbles rise in the ocean of consciousness. You might say the bigger bubbles would be dreams or lifetimes, and the smaller bubbles, independent or attached to them, would be memories that are always surfacing on the ocean of consciousness. The ocean of consciousness itself, as one, carries them all, but different parts of the ocean are not party or privy necessarily to all of those sets of memories. We were playing around with that teaching last week, actually, about in the Chandi, when it's sung, Ya Devi Sarvabhuteshu Nidra Rupena Samstita Namastasyai 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 Namo Namaha Ya Devi Sarvabhuteshu Jaya Rupena Samstita Namastasyai 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 Namo Namaha Ya Devi Sarvabhuteshu Buddhi Rupena Samstita Namastasyai 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 Namo Namaha Ya Devi Namo Namaha Ya Devi Namo Namaha Ya Devi Namo Namaha Ya Devi Namo Namaha those chants, those slokas to the Divine Mother of the Universe in the Chandi, one of the two major mother scriptures of the world, both from India, dedicated entirely to her, evince this triple teaching. And it goes on to sing many other qualities too, but basically starts off with saying that, O Mother, you exist in the hearts and minds of all beings as sleep or samadhi, deep sleep, that is formlessness, and you exist in the hearts and minds of all beings as chaya, shadow play, as maya or illusion. And O Divine Mother of the Universe, you exist in the hearts and minds of all beings as buddhi, as intelligence. So the hidden meaning there, we were saying, would be basically that you have fallen into sleep, nidra rupena samstita. So, and you are engaging in shadow play, chaya rupena samstita. And as a result then, or as a need, then wake up with buddhi rupena samstita, that is, awaken your intelligence. Well, another part sings, Ya Devi Sarvabhuteshu Smriti Rupena Samstita Namastasyai 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 Namo Namaha. O Mother, you exist in the hearts and minds of all being as Smriti, memory. So the questioner here is asking about the Jnana Matra teaching, which a series that we had recently, and that's a atomic cell, a particle, a mind stream particle, which is responsible for all of the sentiency and all the light and all the wisdom in the universes, in the various worlds, not just the physical world, but in the world of the ancestors and saints and seers and Trinity, so forth. All this millions and millions of stream of atomic particles, atmic particles, that eventually will become atomic particles, all flowing in streams of consciousness. So that is, everything is held in there, the Smriti and the Smriti Bedu. When you say Smriti Bedu, it refers more to the memory of deep and profound things that the soul's experienced. We know that there are a lot of surface phenomena and sensations and pleasures and superficialities and so forth that the soul experiences day to day, lifetime to lifetime, and those can form a kind of samskara, a sort of complex, and leave an impression on the mind. That's where you see people who are pleasure lovers, or people who are hedonists, or people who are habitually ill, or people who are habitually superficial and don't have any depth in them. And so those samskaras of mundane human convention are present there as a part of the memory. But the Smriti Bedu in the atmic particle cell refers to something deep and profound that souls have experienced. Probably all souls, but as Sri Ramakrishna has said, some souls bury it very deep. The gold of their being, their Atman, is buried very deep over layers and mounds of these impressions, and one has to dig very deep in order to find them. So meditation would be that process of delving deep into one's own consciousness to pierce through those layers of maya and samskara and karma and desire and so forth, in order to uncover that treasure trove, that gold. But in the case of other beings, that gold, Sri Ramakrishna said, is right at the surface. You just need to brush a few pebbles away, and there it is, shining. So those are the souls whose memories of past lifetimes are very much near the surface still, and in fact they're coursing along the stream of their lifetime, in the stream of these conscious particles, and they live inside of them. they don't wander from them at all. They don't deviate from that path of light that's laid out by those very minute and intelligent, sentient particles that are flowing in streams straight from the Word and radiating outward through the Trinity, through the saints and seers, and the minds of the seers and sages, and through dharmic people, all the way down to conscious souls living here on earth. There's one unbroken stream of conscious particles. So the Smriti Bedu in those souls is alive and well, has not been sacrificed in lieu of pleasures and surface enjoyments and conventional habits, mundane superficialities and things like that. So this is what is said here. Are our past life memories hidden in Smriti Bedu? No, not really, because if Smriti Bedu is known to you, then immediately, because intelligence is immediate, then you'll awaken to them, and you're pretty much walking around in the memory of your past lifetime. And when you look at yourself, you remember all your past lifetimes. And when you look at others, you remember all your past lifetimes. Other souls look at objects and people and relationships and bodies and space and time and so forth, and they occasionally get an inkling maybe of looking at the intelligent particle, looking at their past memories, but they don't pursue that memory. But people who have a leaning towards spiritual life, they will pursue those things as soon as they feel them. We've gotten sort of used to calling it intuition or something like that. But it's much deeper than just intuition, although that's a beginning. One has to take that intuition, or you might use a more cliche-like word, such as déjà vu. You might take that sort of feeling that's coming upon your mind and pursue it deeper. The same psychology is learned by pursuing your dreams. If you want to connect the A, U, and M of Om, and not leave it disconnected and wander about in the three separate worlds that those three letters signify, then you have to connect them, and then you'll be in the Word all the time. And if you're in the Word, you're in its conscious principle. And if you're in its conscious principle, you're in the stream of particles. And you're born in those stream of particles. You're like a light that invades your mother's womb and inserts itself into the fetus in a conscious way. It comes out consciously and lives its life consciously and passes from the body consciously, all due to that stream of intelligent particles flowing from the Word. So I would say you could answer it that all memories lie in Smriti Bedu, covered up in the ignorant person, but being lived moment to moment in the conscious person. What they're seeing everywhere is Brahman. That's what they're told to pursue, that all is Brahman. Everything you see, taste, touch, hear, and smell, as a modification of the mind, has its root, its source in Brahman. So it's the same as saying living in the conscious memory of everything, of all lifetimes. And that is the eternal moment as well. And when you go on further to say, it is confusing to think about memories within one eternal moment, everything is held in that one eternal moment, just like the ocean is containing all sorts of various things, and the ocean itself is never affected. Rivers flow into the ocean, rain falls into the ocean, ships sail on the ocean, there are different aquatic creatures in the ocean, humans go diving in the ocean. Nowadays people pour pollution into the ocean. The ocean seems just to remain the same. And as a metaphor, we're using that for this one eternal moment, which is the ocean of consciousness, signified best by that word Om. So those are a few things I can say about that question. And yes, the best way to look at time, the most lucid and enlightened way to look at time, is being illusory. But time can be known from the standpoint of the witness of time, and when you're in the witness of time, then isn't that a memory of time? Isn't you using the memory to actually foresee time in its future, or look back at something important that happened in its past, or live in the present moment. So depending on how you're using that word memory, it all applies nicely to this wisdom particle that is mentioned here, the Jnanamatra teachings. There are a series of classes that we did that are now being placed on our website that people can look back on. The complete series of the Jnanamatra classes will be available soon. I think 2 or 3 of them are already ready and waiting for people's study. And in fact, the questioner here is probably the one that's helping me work on them and put them on the website. So that's one question here. Another question comes from the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. It says here, in the Gospel of Ramakrishna, and she cites the page 213, generally the body does not remain alive for the attainment of samadhi. Only sages like Narada, who live in order to bring spiritual light to others, retain their bodies after samadhi. The question is, I thought we were all able to obtain samadhi in daily meditation. Is that not correct? The problem with questions is that they can be answered either way. Yes, everything that you experience is a type of samadhi, so you could say yes in that way. But if you're not conscious of it, then you're not relating to it as samadhi, so you would have to say no. Generally, probably a more pat answer for this kind of question is that, which is a good one, is that it depends on the type of samadhi one is talking about. That is, if you have non-dual samadhi, then they say amongst the direct disciples of Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, and we probably infer the same about the apostles of Christ and the disciples of Shankara and Buddha, that very few of them had non-dual samadhi. It's a very rare thing to have. So you'd have to qualify that question by saying, do we have non-dual samadhi every day? No. That could be easily answered with a flat-out no. Non-dual samadhi would leave you entirely bereft of your senses and the ability to move, and the thought process would be gone, the breathing would be stopped. And yes, the soul would probably vacate the body in that sense. And the body would be left like a blown-off leaf in a gale, as Sri Ramakrishna used to say, because his non-dual samadhis were quite common in his later life. But there are other types of samadhi too, the seeded samadhis, that is, those samadhis of wisdom, the samadhis of bliss, the samadhis of individuality, asmita they call it. And there are samadhis that visit you very quick and then leave you. There are samadhis that put you into shock, and after you get over that shock, you don't remember what happened to you. There are so many different kinds of samadhis, and nowadays people aren't having them very often. People are having some experiences. There are some experiences of bliss. Sometimes that's surface bliss. Usually it is surface bliss, because bliss of the ananda variety, which is singular and special, only come to people who really have grounded themselves deep in the heart chakra. That is, they're meditating on their heart chakra every day with tears of love for God and saying their mantra, uncovering the meaning of their mantra inside of themselves with every breath. So that's a kind of deep ecstasy or experience that is also quite rare. You don't hear people talking much about samadhis or these bhavas, these devotional experiences, except amongst the sanghas, like satsang. Then you hear people say, oh, I had a special experience, or maybe the members of your religious group are more likely to have these kinds of experiences because they're with the guru and they're with the holy company, and they're studying the scriptures, and they're meditating, and they're doing puja at the altar, like we just did our arti before we started the satsang tonight. So in that way, you see those experiences start to visit you more often. Whereas if just everyday experiences, even just an hour of meditation each morning, it's not likely that you're going to feel samadhi or come out of your meditation saying, I had samadhi. Even lower samadhis are somewhat rare then in this day and age. We have to really qualify ourselves for them. We aren't going to want to take any wooden nickels. That is, surface blisses are not going to be counted in our estimation as samadhi. And particularly in the case of nirvikalpa samadhi, or what the father of yoga calls asampragyata, unseeded, no seeds left in it, samadhi. Those are kind of samadhis that, yes, can take you out of the body, and maybe never to return. It's not necessarily on your own behest that you will come and go, and that kind of experience takes you over. It will just occur to you, and if that's the moment to happen, maybe most people wouldn't look at it this way, but that death that you're experiencing in samadhi is grace. You're leaving behind all worries and concerns and sufferings and everything in the world, and you're going into the state which is your true nature. So probably that's another reason why people don't have samadhi very often. They don't want it. And because of what it means, what it signifies. So in that way, we were talking last week at satsang about the different kinds of muktis, right? Krama mukti and the gradual mukti, and the deha mukti, the bodiless, where you don't come back to the freedom, where you don't come back to the body anymore. So people proceed slowly, gradually, towards that, what they think of as a distant goal. And enlightenment then dawns on the mind by stages, as Sri Ramchandra says in the Adhyatma Ramayana. It relates to your other question here. The questioner had a second question. I'm not sure exactly how to word this, because it is confusing to me. I hear God does not do anything, God is still, God does not create. In the books I am reading, I cannot find it right now, but it says that God is doing everything. We are just acting out of God's plan for us. And here I'm paraphrasing. This week in our class, I heard God's mind is creating, and I also heard the Word is doing the creating. So my question is, what are we doing here then? Are we just puppets or robots acting out of the plan, or are we creating as we go? Because God does not create. So, of course, defining words and terms is very important in spiritual life, and even more so in Vedanta. We're definitely beings, Vedantists are people who don't have any problem with words and with phrases and with long sentences and with huge books and with the intellectual side of, and the practical and rational side of life. That's the doorway into which we get to things that are beyond practicality and beyond rationality. We don't leave that doorway closed. We open it up, and as we pass through it, we see where we're going. So, just to say that much about the word create, because the word create is, as my teacher used to say, sort of a misnomer. You can't create something out of nothing. So you're going forward to try and create something, but before you even start to do that, it's already existing in your mind. That is, the invention exists in the man's mind even before he thinks of it. It was always there. Just like the sound of the bell was always there in the bell before you struck it. It's just waiting. So in that way, we would replace the word creation with projection in English, sankalpa, vikalpa in Sanskrit, to show that we're not getting something out of nothing. That's irrational thinking. That we're always bringing something into manifestation from an unmanifested place. And then when it disappears, it's only going back to an unmanifested place from which it came. And the forms may rise and fall, but the principle behind the form stays the same. And you can carry that all the way to the bank. The bank here meaning Brahman. ultimate reality, samadhi, that you're having in meditation, if you reach that, is that you can take it all the way up to the highest level of understanding or reality that that is, as they say, use the phrase, it's paid forward all the time in the form of realization. So how that relates to the stillness of God, to the all-pervasiveness, to the stability, to the static nature of Brahman, yet there he is, he, it, genderless Brahman, doing everything. So Sri Ramakrishna used to explain that, and also Ramana Maharshi, that mankind doesn't have any free will. He only has relative free will. And so that makes that distinction a little bit easier for us to understand, that we think we're doing work, but then we find out that it's not our work at all, and that we only thought it was the act we were doing. But all of that was rather dreamlike and insubstantial, and oftentimes resulting in pain and suffering, because the work we did was not well thought or well intentioned or selfless or sattvic. It was restless, it was dark, it was tamasic, or it was an admixture of all the above. So in that way, there are stories in the scriptures, like the man who killed the cow. So he had this beautiful garden, but he killed a cow in it, a great sin. So he covered the cow over with a bunch of weeds and flowers and leaves. So Indra came, the god of the hand, the god of action, came to the garden and asked the man, "Oh, what a beautiful garden! Who did this?" And the man stepped forward and said, "I did this. That's my flower bush. I created that. I did this. I did that." Went all the way around the garden while Indra, in the disguise of a mendicant, asked him all these questions. He finally came to the dead carcass of the cow and then brushed it aside and covered it and said, "Oh, and who did that?" And then the man was trapped, you see. He was caught. He did not want to admit that he had done such a heinous act. So in that way you have this idea of man's will and God's will, or man proposes, God disposes, if you want to put it in English. Or thought is father to the deed. Anything that has to do with action has to be well thought, and anything that's well thought disappears into Brahman. It comes from Brahman and disappears back into Brahman. So you find yourself in the lurch if you're out of harmony with that universal law. So it's better to say, "I do nothing. Of myself I do nothing," but it's a very difficult thing to say. Sri Ramakrishna was a person who could say that, because he was not invested egotistically or in anything, money or relationships. He was completely free. They say he could hardly close a door or button a shirt, because everything to him was just naturally open, and he couldn't bear to have anything closed. He was living in open truth all the time. So, more specifically to your question, to end it, be that no, it's not like we're puppets so much, but it is that God is not doing any creating, and the ultimate reality does not even project. It's the other facets of the mind that do the projecting. One of them you mentioned here, and that is that God's mind is creating. So we have a mind, and we're divorced from it in deep sleep. And then when we wake up and occupy the mind again, that is our consciousness, then we begin to act again, and certain effects are experienced from that action. It's the same in God's mind. God's not really his mind or its mind either. It's mindless, as Vivekananda used to say. He's fooling us with little brains. But I won't be caught napping this time. He wants to make sure that he has not identified with his mind, nor does he want to identify in the end with God's mind, because that's called Mahat, or the great mind, and it means exquisite sattva, or exquisite balance. But beyond God's mind is Brahman, just like beyond our mind is samadhi, when we go into it. like Nidra Samadhi, as we just sang. Deep sleep is a kind of samadhi because we're formless, and that's where we're closest to our true nature. And we're very actionless there. We're thoughtless there. And we're without our energy, without our breath even. Our breath stills cuts almost down to nothing in deep sleep. So we evacuate or vacate all those principles that are in Maya, that are in the world of name and form. And we become actionless. And we come back and then we start acting again. So if we say God's mind, then we can say, yes, that's the great projector. And then out of that great projector comes the collective mind of all beings. And from that collective mind are drawn all the individuals in all the various lokas and worlds, including ancestors and humans and celestials and so forth. So we leave God, as Vivekananda said, acreate. Acreate is a word that he coined in English for the motionless and still, actionless, thoughtless, ever peaceful, static Brahman. And everything then from the vibrating principle of God's mind starts to vibrate with pure thought. And as it comes back down, it gets mixed thought, Shuddha. And if it trickles down further, it gets Shuddha, or Ashuddha, impure. Then it gets mixed with lower tattvas, or lower vibrations. And then we find all of this action going on, of which God is not a part. It's a very important teaching in Vedanta because you get away from the problems of guilt and sin and remorse and grief, and not taking on the responsibility of things which are not under your auspice. And you learn more to be the observer of these things and not to take them on, and be stuck with them your whole life or in your whole series of lifetimes, and they come back on you again and again. So you begin to develop the witness consciousness that's beyond the idea of creating and even beyond the idea of projecting. So you become still like God in meditation, just like in deep sleep tonight, as I was saying. And in that way you begin to understand the nature of reality is peaceful and blissful, non-dual, if you want to say it in a philosophical sense. No, not two, as we say. Can't call it one because that would limit it, so you can call it not two. Now, other questions are here. Here's one about desire. This questioner says, I recognize that when I'm in a state of desire, I'm also in a state of suffering springing from a sense of lack. That's a good definition about lower desire. Thinking this insight might be a doorway, I began to remind myself of it throughout the day and soon came to see that these are desires that don't seem to bring suffering, but that there are desires that do not seem to bring suffering. Most notable among those desires are the desire for God. I also noticed that desires which relate to a dharmically oriented life also leave me feeling peaceful. So the distinction there has been made nicely between the pasu, the animalistic desire, the virya, the heroic desire, dharmic desire, and then the peacefulness of desire for God alone. And this all brings me closer to my question. Along the way, he mentions that Eskimos have something like 300 different words for snow, which is an interesting fact. And he's also talking about the different words he knows of in Sanskrit for desire, like vasana is one, and trishna, he mentions here, is another. He says he's heard that used by the Buddhists, and he's taken it to mean craving. Yes, the word Trishna usually has been used in the sense, especially by the Buddhists, as one of the 12 links or nidanas that cause a person to be reborn and fashion them, the chain that brings them back in 3 lifetime series. So that's called, one of those is called Trishna. It's just thirst for life, as Vivekananda used to call it. That's why in his poem he says, "This thirst for life forever quench. It drags from birth to death and death to birth to soul." So he's talking about desire for base things, for everything from prana on down, you might say. To get to his question, he says, are there nuances of the desire concept in Eastern teachings? And can you lay out a kind of topography of the concept of desire in its whole range, if possible? Not possible in a short amount of time, but I can refer you back to last week's class on Sunday, where I pulled out the 9 ways of neutralizing desire. We had that teaching in our class last week and spent a good hour on it, I think. And along with it were the teachings about rebirth, how to graduate from Bhur Bhuva Swaha into the lower and higher heavens, and from there into the worlds of no rebirth. So in that regard, there were at least 3 different ways of dealing with desire which are inferior, and some 6 possible ways of dealing with desire which are superior. And so that leaves us at least 9 ways in which people can deal with this very persnickety and knotty problem of desire, which the saints and seers of all religions have sort of earmarked for the cause of suffering. I mean, it comes right on down to desire, and then the attachment that desire breeds. And from attachment, then you have obsession, and obsession you get loss of memory. It actually relates back to our first question, doesn't it, about Smriti Bedu and memory. So you begin to lose your memory through that kind of attempt to satisfy desire that fails again and again, lifetime after lifetime. So this loss of reason happens and loss of memory happens. That's actually called the 7-fold road to ruin in the Bhagavad Gita. Sri Krishna is telling Arjuna about it. That's a series, so you can look into the Gita and find out more about that, how desire kicks that whole road to ruination and one's trip or one's journey along it into motion, and then of course by all means avoid it. Now, those inferior types of desire are trying to, basically they all have one commonality to them, is trying to satisfy or fulfill desire or satiate desire, those are the 3, without the Dharma first. So you have to go back to one of the best topographies that you could call on in Vedantic teachings, shared by the Tantra, of course, which is called the 4 fruits of life. And that means Dharma, Kama, Artha, and Moksha. So in that way, Kama is another word that you could apply to desire, is listed in the 4 fruits of life. But notice how, and my teacher always made a point of clarifying this and emphasizing it, that Dharma is placed first before Artha, which means seeking wealth or well-being and material well-being, and then before seeking Kama, which usually is, in a base way, could be defined as lust, but Kama basically just desire for things, and trying to satiate them or satisfy them or fulfill them without the Dharma, and therefore running afoul of universal harmony. And accruing karma, it's not just that you all of a sudden start having a lifetime that's out of balance, but then you begin to get yourself in for worse things. So the karma starts to accrue, and pretty soon, because of that loss of memory, you cannot remember back to the inception of your karma, those acts that you entered into that got you into the suffering in the first place. And that's pretty much the predicament we see many, many people in who are suffering all kinds of problems in this day and age. So that's all can be explained by karma. It's very difficult to explain the karma that caused it, but it can be explained by the theory, if you want to put it that way, of karma. So put the Dharma first, and then go seeking material well-being. After that, try and satisfy your desires. And if you do, then you'll find out these 6 ways of fulfilling desires in the Dharma are things like sublimation, that you can actually use anger and lust and envy and jealousy, all these passions, they call them, that are based on desire and which cause people so much problems. If the Dharma is put first, then you'll find out that those very things turn inward, turn upward. And you can desire after God, you can lust after God, you can be angry that you haven't yet attained God realization, you can be jealous of the saints and seers in a very positive ways because they have attained it and you haven't. So it's a very tantric turn you're giving things. The best word in it in English is called sublimation. It's the best way to do desire, but it won't work without putting Dharma first. And you can also, if you're strong enough, pretty much alleviate your desires on the spot. And that's what's mentioned here by the questioner, Nirvasana. They asked Holy Mother, Sri Sharda Devi, our ideal here in SRV, what's the one thing to pray for? And she said Nirvasana, because freedom from desire, because that's the last lifetime in ignorance you'll ever live if you have freedom from desire. The question is then, how did one get free from desire? And then that's where she would give you the teaching of the 4 fruits. First Dharma, then seek wealth and satisfy your cravings. That is, cravings will become less cravings, Trishna, at that point, and they will become more just burnt ropes, burnt threads, as Sri Ramakrishna used to call them. They look like desires, but they've already been burnt by the fire of wisdom, by Dharma, and even a puff of wind can blow them away. They only have a semblance of desire, so those are rising in you all the time. And it played into her teaching on desire. Later on she said to us that, why do you worry so much about desire, my children? The more the desires come and go for you, the better. So she was causing a very sharp distinction between those people that came to her who were having 16 or 20 children, like animals, and she used to complain about it. 5 or 6 of them had died, and the person became bereft and in grief. And then the people that came to her who were already initiated, who were already committed, who were already surrendered to God, who were already practicing sadhana, those people came. To them she'd say, why do you worry about those desires, my children? The more they come and go, the better for you. As if you're rolling them off the thread, the spool of your mind. The same way they went on. And we had that teaching, I think, last week at Satsanga, or during the class. So those teachings on desire, many of them are listed and gathered in the Sri Sharda Vijnana Gita. If you read that, you'll find many of those teachings. It's a collection of her teachings I've culled out of her main teachings and put together in a form of a book, Sri Sharda Vijnana Gita. Again, then, looking back, based on Dharma first, Artha, seeking to fulfill yourself materially, and then Kama, fulfilling your legitimate desires in Dharma first, and then finally moksha. We didn't even talk much about that, but the 4th fruit is freedom. It's pretty much a tantric teaching with a Vedantic ending. You have moksha, or spiritual enlightenment, waiting for you. All you have to do is follow the Dharma. And why is that so hard to understand? Why are so many hundreds and thousands of people going contrary to the Dharma, doing adharmic acts? People go to other countries and kill people and take their goods, but the Upanishads say right at the beginning, do not covet the goods of others. That's adharmic. So you begin to look at the world, what people have done in the past, what people are even doing today, and you wonder why they haven't got the teachings of the Dharma and why they don't have the intelligent particle to understand what to do and what not to do. It's really quite a simple thing. So the teachings of the Dharma come to save all those souls who understand. And then their intelligent particle will be refreshed, you see. Just like you'd refresh a computer after using it a lot, you see. Clear it away of all its various files and things that have collected, and you just refresh it. So the atomic particle will get refreshed, and those will scintillate and emanate light. And then you'll be free. Or you could even just sing about being free. Shukir Vashana Karo Arkadin. Vashana is desire. Shukir Vashana Karo Arkadin. Tajian Yobo Kali Kali Bo Manobo Janabo Jadin. Shukir Vashana Karo Arkadin. Shukir Vashana Karo Arkadin. Basically, oh mind, why are you focusing and obsessing all the time with these worldly desires? Why don't you give them up? And turn to Mother Kali, who is the satisfier, the fulfiller of all desires. Turn to her teachings. Tajian Yobo Kali Kali Bo. Say Kali Kali over and again, because Kali is the mother of the transformation of the mind, is the transformation of the soul, and she does it through wisdom. That's why she's called the goddess of wisdom, the divine mother of the universe, out of which all of this has come, and who is the purveyor and the possessor of all the intelligent particles. The whole world, the whole word is in her. And in that way, then, we move towards the satisfaction and fulfillment of desires in whichever way you do it, through sublimation, through even tearing them out by the roots if you're strong enough, or another method is asamvedana, just become transparent to them, become invisible, become hard to find. There's an occult power by which you hide yourself from everyone. Forget that. Well, why not try and hide yourself from desire? Desire will come looking for you. That's called vasana. Kama, desire, will come looking for you, and Trishna, desire, will come looking for you, and karma, the effects of desire, will come looking for you. And finally, Yama himself, the god of death, will come looking for you. But if you practice asamvedana, which is awesome, by the way, then karma, desire, and death cannot find you. That's the unborn soul. That is called the ajati vada, the one who follows the path of non-birth and non-death, knows himself to be birthless and deathless, despite what the outer appearances say. So some topography, as is said here, about that problem of desire, which in Tantra and Ramakrishna realm, Ramakrishna Loka, can be turned on its ear and given a positive twist, and therefore by a word like Dharma, you can completely purify Trishna, Kama, and Vasana in one utterance. Just think Dharma. Now, other teachings here, other questions? I think we've covered them all. Any questions come in from the viewers? Well, here's a short question I didn't see. It's called, what is Diwali? So that's, of course, the the season of light and of colors, the holy day, which in fact is even, I think, even called holy. So it's got an English equivalent in our language. But that's, of course, many stories around that with Krishna and Radha and the Rasa Mandala, and the usually you see it as a sort of conventional holiday on the outside, but it also often falls in the same day as Kali Puja too. So we see that it has many direct connections in the holy day. If you're ever there in India, it's quite a grand celebration that's going on the streets, and you might get covered with many colored powders and those kinds of holidays in India. Rather unconventional as the Western person would think of it, but nonetheless very celebrative and having much to do with spirituality underneath the surface. Something to be experienced rather than to be explained. So I think here we are coming to an end. If our questions are all answered, thank you for sending them in, and probably should say that we will not be satsang next Tuesday. I don't think is happening because a group of us of our Sangha are going to India. You're just mentioning that. So we're all headed to India for about a month. So we will be off the air, both classes and also our Arti Satsangs off the air until we return in January, middle of January or so. So keep an eye on your computer screen as far as the SRV website is concerned, and you'll find out when our next class and our next satsangs will be broadcast. You might see a little sign up there saying, "Gone on pilgrimage," and you'll know we're away for a month. And of course, we ask you to join us if you're ever able to. We take these trips maybe once a year, once every 2 years, with a group of us that are wanting to visit some of the holy places in India. And maybe even on Diwali we'll be there. So all of you, in the meantime, we send you our love and our support. And of course, you may still contact us through the various mediums that we use, email and taking the online courses that we offer in SRV, and a host of other things that we do in order to celebrate spiritual life and support everyone who is at this time in the embodied condition, which is, of course, not an easy thing to deal with. Desires, sankalpas, bad memories. We want to change that all with the word called Dharma and righteousness and spiritual life, and live a life which is beneficial to ourselves and to all others. So here I will end with a chant in Sanskrit, and then looking forward to being with you again in whatever mode as soon as possible. Om Tachnayo Ma Vrinnivahe Gatum Yagyaya Gatum Yena Pate Daivi Swastarastu Naha Swastir Manushebhyaha Urdvam Jagatu Besajam Sangnoastu Dvivate Sang Chatushpate Om Shanti 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 Hi. May we make a great offering into the self. May we always delight in this offering, always revere the Lord and Mother of all sacrifices. May divine blessings be upon us. May peace be unto the entire human race. May healing, well-being, and prosperity then also abide among us. Om peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us. May peace be unto all. Om Hari Om.